The Las Vegas Raiders lost in the wild card round of the 2021 playoffs to the eventual AFC champion Cincinnati Bengals with a score of 26-19. They finished the year with a 10-7 record, and the future looked considerably bright for them. They went 10-7 and made the playoffs after dealing with a ton of things through the 2021 regular season, like the Henry Ruggs and John Gruden incidents. It very easily could have been a forgettable season for them, and everyone would have understood. But they didn't back down and fought until the very end. And entering 2022, they acquired one of the best receivers in all of football in Davante Adams, which reunited him with former Fresno State teammate Derek Carr. They also signed veteran pass rusher Chandler Jones, and with these two acquisitions, they were expected to take a big step in 2022. But that step never happened. They have double-digit losses, and the once promising future is history. But how did they get to where they are now? And this goes back a couple of years, and in today's video, we are going to break everything down, and without further ado, let's begin. A lot of people want to place the blame for the Raiders' 2022 struggles on Derek Carr, and don't get me wrong, he does deserve some of the blame, and we will get into that later, but for now we are going to take a glance back at what more often than not makes teams succeed for a couple of years in a row. Not just a 10-win season here, followed by back-to-back 6 or 7-win seasons, but sustained success over the course of time. Of course, the quarterback plays a big part in that, but here we are focusing on hitting first-round picks. Their 2022 first and second-round pick, for that matter, was traded for Davante Adams, and with a game left to play, he has 95 catches for over 1,400 yards and 14 touchdowns on the year, and is without a doubt a hit. And unfortunately for Raiders fans, out of the next few we are going to discuss, this is far and away the biggest hit out of any of the past few years. Their 2021 first-round pick was Alex Leatherwood from Alabama, who is no longer on the roster. And sure, draft busts happen, but what was particularly bad in this case, aside from him being a draft bust, was when they realized Alex was no longer a part of their long-term plans and wanted to get him off the roster, nobody offered a draft pick after a single year of him being selected in the top 20. In his lone season with the Raiders, he gave up 8 sacks and 65 pressures over the course of the 2021 season, and because nobody offered a pick, the Raiders flat out released him. To make matters worse, this was a reach of a draft pick, and a couple picks later, the Minnesota Vikings selected Christian Darrisaw, who has been graded as one of the best left tackles in all of football this year. This doesn't get talked about as much because it wasn't a back-to-back selection like the year before, but in some ways this is similar to the Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson back-to-back pick. Everyone thought Darrisaw was a far better prospect, and through 2 years, they're right. The 2020 first round for the Raiders is not just a bad first round for any team in that particular year, it's up there for one of the worst first rounds in the last 10 years, if not ever. They started the night off by selecting Henry Ruggs, the speedster from Alabama, and we all know how his NFL career ended. What's particularly unfortunate for the Raiders, from a football standpoint, is as much as they've struck out over the past few years, this looked like one they were going to hit on. Their other first-round pick was woeful, as they selected Damon Arnette from Ohio State, who was at best a mid-third round prospect and was cut for off-the-field activity. So we're looking at each of their last 3 first-round picks, obviously excluding Davante, within the past few years that are not currently on the roster. And think about how much better the Raiders would be if they had a first-round caliber corner or a first-round caliber offensive lineman like Christian Darrisaw on their team. 2019 was supposed to be a game-changing year for them, as they had 3 first-round picks, and Josh Jacobs has panned out in 2022, but the other 2 did not, and they were Clelin Ferrell, who has started 3 games over the past 2 years, and Jonathan Abram, who was released during the middle of the 2022 season. So out of their last 6 true first-round picks, and yes, this dates back to the John Gruden era, one has panned out, and the one that panned out was Josh Jacobs, and because of his position, there will be a debate this offseason of whether or not to pay him and how long of a contract extension they should give him. And when you go 1 of 6 on first-round picks over the course of a 3-year span, typically the results for the franchise are not good, and that's where we are with the Raiders. What also genuinely stinks for them is something completely out of their control, and that's having a Hall of Fame head coach in your division in Andy Reid that you get to play not once but twice per year, along with both Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. So for a team that has had their fair share of struggles over the past, really 2 decades, why not just add one of the best young quarterbacks the NFL has ever seen on top of their problems? They've made the playoffs once since 2016, which was of course last year, and in some ways that hurts them in the long run. And what I mean by that was it gave everyone a huge sense of hope and belief that if we can make the playoffs during the 2021 season, in a year where shit went down, imagine what we can do in a more normal year. But here we are in a more normal year, and out of the Raiders' 10 losses, 9 of them have been by 1 score. And saying that's extremely frustrating, well, guys, it would be an understatement, especially when you dive into some of these losses. We're not going to deep dive into every loss, but to highlight a few, we'll start with Week 1. This, in a lot of ways, set the tone for the Raiders' 2022 season. They lost 24-19 to the Los Angeles Chargers, and in this game, Derek Carr threw 3 interceptions, with 2 of them occurring in the fourth quarter. The next week, they lost to Arizona with a score of 29-23 in what was a brutal overtime loss, as they went into half up 20-0, and through 9 games, they were 2-7. Also, within that Arizona game, they lost on a fumble return in overtime. Some of the highlights of their other losses include a 24-0 loss to the Saints in a game where Derek Carr threw one of the most reckless interceptions you ever see from an NFL quarterback, a 27-20 loss to the Jags in a game they were up 17-0 in the first half, and last but not least, perhaps the most remembered loss of the year, the Jeff Saturday Colts loss. And after a while with all of these losses, and especially with these close losses, that has to take a toll on the locker room, especially the Jeff Saturday loss. And to date, that is still the only game the Colts have won with Jeff Saturday as an interim head coach. In what's going to be the final 3 games Derek Carr starts as a Raider, they went 1-2 with 2 one-score losses. Those losses were against the Rams and Steelers, and what's particularly bad or unfortunate for the Raiders in both of these games is they were on prime time and everyone saw them. Baker Mayfield was a Ram for 48 hours and led a 14-point fourth quarter comeback in a game Derek Carr, the supposed franchise quarterback, went 11 of 20 for 137 yards and 2 interceptions. They were 5-7 entering this game, and if all you need is 18 points to win on the road, you are going to take those chances 99% of the time. And there is a ginormous difference when your season is on the line and your record is 6-7 versus 5-8. They won the Patriots game the next week with a Chandler Jones walk-off touchdown to improve to 6-8, then went into Pittsburgh and very easily could have beat the Steelers. In that game, Derek Carr completed just 53.3% of his passes, the Raiders put up 10 points, and he also threw 3 interceptions to put him at 14 on the year, which tied for a career high and ultimately led to him being benched for Jarrett Stidham. Carr's completion percentage drop-off from 2021 to 2022 is a substantial difference, as he went from 5th in the NFL at 68.4% in 2021 to 29th in the NFL at 60.8% over the course of 1 year. And now the Raiders are truly in no man's land, because a lot of the fans not only want Carr gone, and he will be with time, but they also want head coach Josh McDaniels gone too. And if you have yet another head coaching change, combined with the division they're in, which is already a very hard division to win in, where do you take this franchise? Do you blow it up completely and trade Devontae and get what you can for him after him tearing it up all year? And I'm not saying they do or they are going to do this, But Davante is 30 years old, and I highly doubt he would want to wait 2 years for a player like CJ Stroud to get up to speed or more into his prime while he is aging and would presumably not yet have a Super Bowl ring in this scenario. Again, I don't think they are going to trade Davante a year after acquiring him, but I do think the Raiders are going to run into a problem where they piss off their top players because they simply do not win enough games. And if they win even a few of the games they lost this year, like games they should have won, like a 14-point fourth quarter comeback by Baker Mayfield, like the Jeff Saturday game, and like the Jags game, we are not having this conversation about this team. The Raiders are currently selecting in the top 10 of the 2023 NFL Draft, and there are several quarterback-needy teams in front of them, like the Texans, Colts, and Falcons. All of these teams have several holes and are picking in the top 10 for a reason, but by the time the Raiders are on the clock, all of the quarterbacks may be gone. So realistically, we are looking at a scenario where they're kind of pressed to move up or sit where they are and take the best player available. And given how their draft history has gone recently, I would like to think they sit where they are and choose the BPA, best player available. But with Derek Carr almost certainly getting traded this offseason, what are they going to do at the quarterback position is a huge mystery at this point in time. They've also forced the second fewest turnovers in the NFL with 13 on the year and have given up the 8th most points in the NFL. And when you are bottom 2 at forcing turnovers and in the bottom 10 of points allowed, you are more often than not going to have a losing record, and this checks out. Obviously, the decision the Raiders make around quarterback will be under a microscope this offseason, but they have plenty of other needs. They will need to get another pass rusher opposite Max Crosby, as Chandler Jones will be 33 years old next year, and it is better to be a year ahead than a year behind when addressing a need. Max can't do it all, and Chandler hasn't exactly been the 100-plus career sack player they paid this offseason either. He has 4.5 sacks on the year, with 3 coming in one game, which was back in Week 13 against the Chargers. The Raiders, in a lot of ways, remind me of the NFC version of the Washington Commanders. Both haven't won a playoff game since the 2000s, and both are usually in the hunt one way or another, but opponents rarely fear or dread playing them, and each will win anywhere from 6 to 8 games a year, with maybe an occasional 9 or 10 game season, only to be a first-round exit and move on to the following year. And here we are again with the Raiders after another 6-win year. Raider Nation is one of the best fan bases in the NFL, as they are passionate, loyal, and fierce as hell. And quite frankly, they are sick of losing, and I don't blame them. But what should they do this offseason? That's one thing I am very much looking forward to, and I hope you are too, because they are going to be a very active team. Let me know in the comments what you think they will do, because there are a ton of moving pieces. And that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.